You probably have heard this, but Atlanta or Delta Airlines in Atlanta just received authorization to start their direct and nonstop flight from Atlanta to Shanghai next March. And I was wondering if you can comment just on the how relevant that will be to continuing to grow this and cultivate this relationship of openness and cooperation with China.
Well, I think that's tremendously important and very, very exciting. Let me give you a little background about how that all came about.
That'd be great.
At our strategic economic dialogue, one of the key items that was being discussed was between our Transportation Secretary, Mary Peters, and her counterpart on the Chinese side. It was a new civil aviation agreement to expand passenger flights and cargo flights. And what we're able to do in the strategic economic dialogue is to be able to lift up certain issues and to provide momentum that a whole range of officials in the U.S. government, momentum that they're able to draft behind. So these civil aviation talks in March, they were stuck in the ditch. Secretary Paulson was able to bring them back on track. By April, they were back in the ditch again. But we were able to get them back on track so that in May, we were able to get a truly breakthrough civil aviation agreement. And one of the benefits of that is this nonstop flight from Atlanta to Shanghai, the first nonstop flight in America from a city in the southeast to China. So I just couldn't be more excited about that, and I think it augurs well for Atlanta, but also just in terms of expanding our economic relationship in general.
And do you think that is tourism a part of what you've talked about in the SED talks?
Good question. Absolutely. We did have a discussion about that, and in fact, we've had very extensive negotiations about that. I was on the phone with a fellow from the Treasury Department just today about efforts that we're making to try to be able to wrap up a tourism agreement between the U.S. and China that would expand group tours coming to the United States.
And what are some of the difficulties with that right now? Is it difficult to get visas? I've been to China 4 times before, and I've never had a really big problem, but I've heard that some restrictions have been put forth lately that may have caused some difficulty.
Yeah, my understanding is that there are some visa issues for China group travel contingents for them to be able to come to the United States, and that's one of the issues that's being addressed. There are a whole range of issues that we're trying to address in the strategic economic dialogue. I mean, part of it is financial sector reform, helping China to be able to open up their financial sector. Huge issues with respect to energy security, energy efficiency, and environmental sustainability. Issues regarding integrity of trade, consumer protection, product safety. You've seen a lot of the press stories about toys, or seafood or other items that have been in controversy. So we're trying to work with the Chinese to be able to address those issues. Issues for companies, for example, companies in Atlanta that want to be able to invest in China, to be able to make sure that the challenges that they have with respect to making those investments, like protection of intellectual property rights or restrictions that they might have in China, that those are able to be addressed for them. So there are a broad range of issues that we're trying to address in the strategic economic dialogue that we hope are really going to be able to open things up further for American businesses doing business in China, but also just to be able to expand and deepen that our economic relationship.
And how much control can the central government exert on say areas that are farther away from Beijing and harder to control in the realm of intellectual property and investments and things like that? Well, it seems that, you know, we can talk about it a lot, but they're going to have to really put the feet on the ground and do it.
No, that's a terrific question and one that we address all the time. There's a saying in China that the mountains are high and the emperor is far away. And part of that reflects some of the challenges that the central government has in making sure that what they want to have done with respect to environmental protection or issues with respect to product safety and other protection of intellectual property rights, that their statements or that their pronouncements are indeed carried out. You have to remember, China has grown so fast in less than 3 decades. And what we're working with them on is to help them establish the regulatory and legal infrastructure to be able to keep up with their tremendous growth. I mean, it's almost a situation like one of those small companies in Atlanta that has grown tremendously, and then they've got to be able to build the infrastructure to be able to keep up with that tremendous growth. So that's one of the important issues we're dealing with.
You mentioned about China wanting to move more toward domestic consumption, and
Right.
I've heard a lot about the rising Chinese middle class. How fast is that developing, and will it have an impact on American imports into China?
There is a growing middle class within China. And you have to remember, this is a population of 1.3 billion people, which is a tremendous market opportunity for U.S. exporters. But there's also tremendous disparity in terms of levels of economic development. I mean, there are some provinces within China that have per capita GDP equal to that of Uganda. So there's tremendous opportunity for further growth, but one of the biggest challenges I think the Chinese central government has is to be able to make sure that the benefits of their extraordinary economic growth are spread around their country more broadly and more equitably.
And this is just actually for clarification for me, because it's something I've heard. Is it true that the Chinese own over $1 trillion in U.S. reserves, in currency reserves with the U.S. dollar? And what does that actually mean, if you can kind of summarize that in a nutshell?
It is true that the Chinese have 1.3 or 1.4 trillion in reserves. Now, not all of that is invested in U.S. debt instruments or other instruments, the total that we understand that they have with respect to U.S. Treasuries is somewhere in the neighborhood of $350 billion. Well, every day in the U.S. markets, there's like $500 billion that is traded. So in the U.S. we have a very deep and liquid debt market.
Okay.